introduce our speakers, and begin the Q&A function. Give it just a few more seconds to begin. Okay. I want to welcome all of my Southern affiliate colleagues to this call. You are looking at a picture of me when I had hope. But for those who don't know me, I am with the ACLU of Tennessee, and I am the policy director for this affiliate. And I know it's been a while since we've all shared a space, and this is the first speaker series, I think the first of 6, and we're starting off with a pretty powerhouse panel that I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But this panel and this discussion is called Bringing Down Ballot Issues and Races to the Forefront, and I'll run through the webinar agenda. So we'll begin with a welcome and agenda overview, have a quick discussion, and I'll be passing it to Alana in just a moment, and on the importance of down ballot races and issues. Then we'll begin our Q&A and then allow for our participants throughout the Southern affiliates to ask any questions they have. But to begin with our panelists, by alphabetical order in first name, would like to introduce Andrea Mercado. She is the incoming executive director of New Florida Majority. She is a co-founder of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, where she was the director of campaigns for 5 years, overseeing campaigns that won domestic worker Bill of Rights legislation in 7 states, won national overtime protections for 2 million home care workers, and directed the We Belong Together campaign to highlight the impact of immigration policy on women and girls. Andrea is the daughter of immigrants from South America and has been organizing communities of color and immigrant communities for over a decade. She was the political director of and lead organizer at Mujeres Unidas y Activas, MUA, a grassroots Latina immigrant women's organization in the San Francisco Bay Area. Previously, she lived and worked in Bahia, Brazil, a substantial agricultural project organizing against free trade agreements, and as global justice organizer for the Miami Worker Center. Andrea, a mother of 2, resides in South Florida. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Ashley Shelton. She is the executive director of the Power Coalition, a statewide 501c3 table in Louisiana. The Power Coalition uses a broad-based strategy that combines community organizing, issue advocacy, and civic action, all while increasing the capacity of community organizing throughout the state to sustain and hold the work. Our integrated voter engagement approach has changed policy at the municipal and state level, as well as moved infrequent voters of color to vote at the same levels as chronic voters in the communities where they run a full Get Out the Vote program. She also was the former vice president of programs at the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Foundation, now the Foundation for Louisiana. In her role at the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Foundation, Ms. Shelton managed a system of integrated value-added programs in the aftermath of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. In her role at LDRF, she designed, initiated, and coordinated a comprehensive policy strategy which led to a systemic, multi-pronged approach to equitable policy development on a local, state, and national level. She utilized a participatory model that engaged local, state, and national partnerships to develop and nurture civic engagement throughout the state. And thank you for joining us. And last and certainly not least, Wanda Mosley, Senior Coordinator at Black Voters Matter. dedicated to stomping out voter suppression any and every place it rears its evil intent. I like that, Wanda. Wanda Mosley is the senior coordinator in Georgia at Black Voters Matter. Prior to working at BVM, Wanda worked as the community outreach and volunteer manager at the New Georgia Project. In 2018, she was selected to be a part of the inaugural cohort of Fellows for the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice League. Wanda is a graduate of Texas Christian University's Bob Schieffer School of Journalism, and she has a certificate in screenwriting from UCLA. She credits her great-grandmother, Allie Mae Charleston, for teaching her why the right to vote is the most sacred right for all Americans. Wanda was in the grade when she first saw her granny serving as a poll worker and at her elementary school in Seattle, Washington. Granny taught all of her children, grand and great-grandchildren, that many die for the right to vote and should never be taken for granted. After successful careers as a reporter at the Dallas Morning News, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and as a marketing executive in the beverage industry, Wanda has spent the last 5 years of her professional life helping increase access to the polls for all Georgians when she is not nagging friends and neighbors to attend city council, zoning, or school board meetings. She enjoys playing tennis in various leagues and spending time in her vegetable garden, learning to appreciate the land and all that it has to offer. And so welcome to all of our speakers. Really happy to have you all here. Sorry, I was looking down at you all's bios. I don't like looking at the screen and not knowing what's happening. But right now, I would love to pass it to the executive director of the ACLU of Louisiana, Alana Odoms, to discuss the importance of down ballot issues and races.
I hope you can hear me. Brandon, can y'all hear me?
I can hear you, Alana.
Okay, great. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm really, really excited to be here with all of you. I want to take the opportunity to say that the panel of incredible leaders that are going to be having this discussion with us is truly inspiring. And I was honored to be asked to give remarks this morning, and I thought very intently about what I wanted to say. And I first and foremost want to just say that I am so proud of this organization. I'm incredibly proud of the work of the Southern Collective. I am proud of the incredible men and women, in particular, the men and women of color who have worked so intently to create the Southern Collective and to identify voting as one of the key areas of focus of the work. And I also want to recognize the affiliate support leadership and Sandra and Carrie and Sarah and others who work so intently on helping to undergird and support the work of the Southern Collective. Ashley Shelton of the Power Coalition has heard many of my remarks before, and so I will say that the thing that I'm most proud of and the thing that I'm most excited about is that the ACLU is prepared for this most important time in our nation's history. And I think taking this opportunity to talk about down ballot races is wonderful, and we've done it so many times before. We know the power of voting all the way down the ballot and what that can do for communities, because politics is always local first. But what I think I want to do with these next few minutes is just to say that we have been prepared for a moment such as this. And all we need do is look back to the ancestors and those who have come before us in doing this work. And I think about John Lewis, of course, and I think about Fannie Lou Hamer, and I think about Harriet Tubman, and I think about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and I think about, frankly, also Lyndon B. Johnson. And I think about those who came before us, who laid the groundwork and who paid the price and sacrificed, and really think about the ways in which we are indeed prepared for a moment such as this. And so I have heard, I've been on conversations almost kind of daily, hearing the incredible strategies that all of the affiliates have put in place to prevent the suppression of our vote, to prevent the closing of polling places, to get out the vote, to work on election protection. These plans and these incredible strategies and tactics are incredibly well thought out and have been honestly fleshed out with the blood, sweat, and tears of all of our, all of our team members. But I think right now, because essentially we are at the final hour, we are in the 11th hour, we are in the home stretch. Now is the time for us to look inward. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and believe in the work that has been done that has brought us to where we are. Now is the time to rely on our strength and to rely on one another. Because although we believe and we know that there's much work to be done before the election, we have to understand and recognize that we have the power, right? The power coalition. We have this power, and it is within each of us. And we are enough. We are enough, and we are powerful. And when we truly sit in that power, and when we truly believe in the power that we have, and we really galvanize that power by recognizing that power in one another and taking that power into the community, and deeply believing in who we are, I think that is essentially the heart of how we will get through these next 20 some odd days, and how we will succeed no matter what the outcome of the election is. Because if there's one thing that we know, is that we have been through hard times. And we have been through hard times for the last 4 years, and there have been hard times, obviously much harder than these, that we've seen each other through. And I just want to express to this collective that the work that we're doing is life-changing work, is powerful work, and it will prove to be incredibly important and incredibly powerful in this election. But I don't want folks to despair. I do not want us to lose the deep conviction and the deep promise of, no matter what happens in this election, no matter who is president, no matter what happens in terms of our down ballot races, we are fighting as hard as we possibly can. Our efforts are enough. Our courage is enough. Our strength is enough. And whatever the outcomes are, we will be galvanized and empowered to meet those challenges, right? Just as we were galvanized and empowered to meet the challenges after Trump's election. And sometimes we don't see, we think that we've got to step out on faith, frankly, and sometimes we have to believe beyond the things that we can see. And I know that the folks who are doing the work, who are going to speak with us this afternoon, are going to give us additional confidence and additional solace that the work is being done. But I think the most important message that I could offer to you and offer to this body is that we were in fact prepared for a moment just like this one. And that we will, no matter what, we will fulfill what our ancestors and our forefathers and foremothers have asked of us. And we've committed to that, and we're living that every day. And then we will see each other on the other side, right? Because this is about relationship and transformation and not about transaction. And so on November 4th, I will see your faces and you will see mine, and we will be locked on, we will be arm in arm in this struggle to continue to promote racial equity, to continue to promote freedom, to continue to promote justice, and to continue to promote the ideals that we hold so dear in our Constitution. And so if we could all just make sure that we take a moment to take a breath, make sure that your feet are planted on the floor, straighten out your back, because they want to see your back, they want to see your back hunched, right? They want to see you down. They want to see your eyes looking downward. But we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to straighten our backs. We're going to lift our chins. We're going to take a deep breath in. exhale through the mouth. And we are going to be ready to fight. Thank you.
Alana, thank you. Um, that was important for a couple of reasons, just for me personally. And we're about to get into this powerful conversation. But let's, one, toss out the formalities here. We're family, and we are sharing information that is moving the work forward, but also sharing our personal experiences. But what's also important that I heard there, and I think it's represented in the faces of our panelists, is that this is no weak constituency that the country thinks is beating down. Um, the more I've seen news trying to suppress, depress, beat me down, um, I've been feeling so equipped, so empowered. And largely it's because of people like our panelists, people like Alana, people like my wife. And yeah, November 4th, I'm going to be equipped and strong and ready to do the work. But let's get into this conversation of folks that have been doing the work and will continue to do this work. And so let me begin with Wanda. Um, if you could just talk to us about what issues or down ballot races that you specifically and your organization specifically are centering um, this summer and going into this election.
Well, first, let me just acknowledge those amazing words that we just heard from Sister Alana. That was amazing and much needed and much appreciated. So thank you for that. Thank you for having me. It's such a privilege and an honor to be on a panel with such dynamic women doing amazing work. And shout out to you too, Brandon, because you hold me down. So yeah, down ballot races. Here in Georgia, we are definitely looking at this Public Service Commission race because we know that this is an opportunity for us to continue our work as a power building organization. We want our folks to know that this PSC race, as we're joined by one of my cats, this PSC race has a tremendous effect on their utilities. We are at a time and place where climate change is real in spite of what we hear coming out of 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza. It is a real thing. It is happening, and we are all living it, especially here in the Deep South. I don't need to tell you that Hurricane Delta, not to be affiliated with my sorority, is currently churning and making its way to land. And we ran out of named storms this year, for crying out loud. We're into the Greek alphabet. And so we know that here in Georgia in particular, many of our folks are struggling at the intersection of racial inequality and environmental racism. We know that folks in areas outside of Atlanta, in particular South and Central Georgia, routinely will experience utility bills $8, $9, $1,000, $2,000 in the months after a named storm comes through, and they find themselves without power for days or weeks. And so this is a perfect opportunity for us to first educate our folks about this issue and then help them build the tools to be able to affect change, to build that power on the ground. And it's one of those things where once I really started to get my mind around this race and its importance, I just said to myself, well, why don't candidates just say, you want some lower utility bills? Vote for me. That would be so easy. But that's not what we get. And that's okay, because we're here to fill the gap and work with the folks and help them understand the importance of that race in particular.
Thank you, Wanda. Andrea, if you could speak to what issue or race you've been centering, your organization has been centering this past year leading up to this election.
Thanks so much. Excellent to be with all of you. I've been a community organizer for almost 20 years, and movement lawyers and lawyers that really understand the importance of partnering and being in right relationship with directly impacted people have always made critical contributions to every campaign and movement that I've had the honor of being a part of. Here in Florida, we know that elections come down to the wire. that every vote counts, in a state with 23 million people, that 30,000, 100,000, 12,000 people can make the difference. And that margin is even slimmer in those down ballot races that are so critical, that, are decisive in so many of the issues in our lives. So wanted to share with you a little bit. I mean, together with our Florida for All coalition, we do endorse candidates, although we're not an independent political organization. We work with community members to make decisions, and we have endorsed in over 100 races up and down the state, because we know it matters to have people in Tallahassee or at the county commission or at city council that will really go to bat for Black and Brown communities. And while our state often swings in presidentials, it's been governed by one party in Tallahassee for the past 20 years. After the 2016 election, the Miami-Dade mayor was the first mayor to stand with Trump on immigration detainers and on a huge setback to the immigrant rights movement. And that was Carlos Jimenez. And so it gives me great joy that we are now looking to see a real change at the Miami-Dade County Commission, not only by, hopefully having the first women mayor in Miami-Dade's history, but that will actually be able to have many champions on that county commission that will put immigrant rights and the interests of working class families at the forefront. So that's one of the races that we're, really focused on and hammering it, trying to make sure that every community member understands that our vote is our power, that whether you're white or Black or brown, in this moment, we are each called to marshal all of our talents, our privilege, our resources to defeat fascism and deliver a crushing blow to white supremacy. And that when we reject messages of fear and division, and when we join forces with people from all walks of life, we are able to build the power to win on our issues. And the 1% can't benefit when we get it all the way together. So I'm super proud of the contributions that organizers up and down the state and volunteers up and down the state are making. I truly believe that our vision for the future is too vibrant to allow it to be taken away. And they're going to continue stirring racial anxiety, and that's their strategy to hold on to power. But we know the American people are with us, and that it's up to us to have those conversations that bridge difference and center our humanity. So deeply thankful for all of the work that all of you are doing across the South, because we know that as the South goes, so goes the nation. So thank you.
Thank you. And to Ashley at the Power Coalition, what issues or race have you been centering this summer and going into this election?
Yes, good morning. It's so good morning. I think in Louisiana, what's, one, thank you for having me today. I was just texting Chris Kaiser. I was like, how excited I am to be on this panel with these powerful women, as well as yourself, Brandon, talking about what's going to be necessary to build voice and power in Black and Brown communities across the South. For Louisiana, I think that one thing that's really critical in these down ballot races for us is that, almost since, certainly since the summer, we've been talking about DA's races across our state, and that those races were actually going to be as powerful as the top of the ticket. And I think that, for example, in New Orleans, we've had, the same, kind of district attorney for 6 years, and people have felt really helpless as we've watched these headlines time and time again of just, corrupt leadership, fake subpoenas. It just was a never ending onslaught of just inequity and injustice. And I think that people felt powerless, or like, what were they supposed to do about it? And what we've been telling folks across the state for all of these DA's races, that this is our moment to actually use our vote and our voice to put leadership in that is going to prioritize Black and Brown lives, that will allow Black and Brown folks to walk in their full human dignity, as well as to ensure that they use their discretion to actually give people their lives back and not do what we've seen happen over the last 6 years or more. And so, and so for us, we've been really working with communities across the state to really to take a stand on this never-ending cycle of criminalization and poverty that exists in the Deep South, and in particular in Louisiana, that's driven by the district attorneys. And so this is our opportunity to really have communities see more than they've ever seen, right? Like how these decision makers are impacting their lives. And I think this moment that we find ourselves in this pandemic, and kind of the onslaught of the humanitarian crisis that's coming on the other side of it, is that people are more aware than ever that elected officials are making decisions about the quality of their life, from access to healthcare, food security, housing security. These things are coming up time and time again. And so as we look at the wholeness of the ballot, these DA's races become really powerful. And, so I think that there are a couple of races that we feel excited about, because it's an opportunity to really take a stand on, on leadership that has felt, brutal to Black and brown communities. And so whether that be in New Orleans or New Iberia or Shreveport, like we are really trying to move the needle and have community really speak about what kind of leadership that they want to have, and to have them show up profoundly, have Black and brown voters show up profoundly in those races. In addition to these DA's races, we also see the constitutional amendments that are also seeking to lessen the voice and power of people in our state. And so helping people understand what those constitutional amendments mean, and how and what impact they're going to have on people's daily lives, whether it be tax breaks for corporations that undermine our public education system, our personal freedoms, and access to healthcare. All of these things are on the ballot and being written into our Constitution through these constitutional amendments. And so for us, like we're really focused on these down ballot issues and helping people, really focus on, this is the power of what you get to decide. And that as we fought so many of these things, over the years, that it's so much easier on the front end to one, ask for what we want, demand what we want of these candidates, to really prioritize the issues that matter to us, and then to put into office people that actually reflect and are willing to do the work of the people. And I think that at the end of the day, in Louisiana, as Alana said, we're ready. I mean, we have done the work. We have been building power. We have been building voice, and are excited about how and in what ways people are gearing up to be a part of these conversations, to see how folks are showing up to forums, via Zoom. I mean, hundreds of folks are trying to find the answer. And so, so we're excited about the opportunity that's ahead of us. And more importantly, we're ready and engaging over, we know the numbers. We've got 145,000 unregistered Black voters that we're bringing into the fold. We've got another 200,000 to 300,000 voters that have been dropped, purged, or moved from the rolls that we are re-engaging and re-registering and helping to develop a voter plan. But these are the things that we know we have to do. And most importantly, and I was teasing before the call, Louisiana just won a very critical lawsuit where our Secretary of State had presented what the governor, as well as ourselves, has said was woefully inadequate, and would not have provided the real protections that were needed for folks to vote safely, and through a lens of from a public safety and public health lens. And so in that lawsuit, federal judge Shelley Dick not only awarded 3 additional days for early voting, but she allowed the original presidential primary reasons for requesting an absentee ballot. So that includes having an underlying condition, that includes being a caretaker for someone that's vulnerable. I mean, there are 5 reasons that now folks have to actually request a ballot. And so these are the kinds of fights and wins that, again, we've been waiting on and been prepared for, and are making sure that we're allowing our folks to engage and understand the power of their vote. And I remind folks, it was like, if your vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to suppress it.
Thank you. I think that's spot on. And, speaking of civil rights and civil liberties, and Ashley just spoke to bringing the issues like criminalization of poverty to voters, and them inherently recognizing that policing or the criminal legal system looks different within their communities, but they're putting a name to it and letting it be known that it's on the ballot through this mechanism. I want to ask Wanda, as it pertains to civil rights and civil liberties, I think there perhaps is a belief that it's always about the president or about the Supreme Court, but could you speak to how you're connecting the issues pertaining to civil rights and civil liberties and what's really at stake in your local races or your down ballot races in the South this year?
Yeah, so we actually co-hosted an event last month, or no, maybe it was August. I don't even know what day it is. I just know it's real close to Election Day. Um, we hosted an event called Justice is on the Ballot, where we had experts come in and really explain what DAs, sheriffs, and all the different judges and the roles that they play in our criminal justice system. I think the judge part of the seminar, the webinar was really important because there are so many different judges from municipal to state. Some are elected, some are appointed. So that was very rich and very knowledgeable. That was the feedback that we received. But then also too, the folks that we partnered with, Color of Change, and the I think it's called Rural Sheriffs and Judges Coalition or something like that. They did a really good job too of showing examples of what a progressive sheriff and a progressive DA would look like, and giving them examples of how it is that they go about doing their job from a different lens. And so, having the opportunity to really present this to our folks all over the state and break these roles down and their jobs down and help them understand, I think was really, really important. I mean, look, we were all astonished by what happened to Ahmaud Arbery back in February. Not only the actual act itself, but the dereliction of duty from those in the local criminal justice system, from the county to the city, and their inaction and their inability to seek justice for him, for his family. And so, this was a really good opportunity to tie that into something that was happening real time. And, just looking at a timeline, Ahmaud Arbery happened before Breonna Taylor and before George Floyd and before Rayshard Brooks here in Atlanta. So it was already something that was on the minds of folks. And so bringing them this information, I think, was really important. And then even beyond that, this same coalition has offered to help us 100 days after the election reconvene and work with folks in communities to, again, go over what a progressive sheriff, a progressive judge or DA looks like, and come up with scorecards and be able to work for different changes at the local level, from citizen review boards to other tactics and ways that we can impose accountability on these officials. So definitely, again, we're here today and we're talking about this, and I think it's really good to hear and share how it is that we keep reminding our folks it's not just the top of the ticket, especially when you get to the middle and the end. Those are the things that are affecting us every single day. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to come here and not only share what we're doing, but listen and hear what colleagues across the South are talking about and what they're doing.
I was just about to say that y'all, for the affiliates on this call, y'all need to be taking notes and writing this stuff down, because what you just said about the 100-day post-election, that is valuable. And the importance of getting out, but also the connection now currently with the importance and the value and the accountability mechanism cannot be let go, especially as it pertains to this upcoming election and future administrations. Ashley, can you speak to the same question about civil rights, civil liberties? I know you already mentioned policing and the DA's races and how folks are connecting these issues as they pertain to local and down ballot races.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that, that we keep talking about, in community is, like, we've done it their way, right? Like the hard on crime, all the things we can think, all the, campaigns and slogans that have been used in the past. And what has it gotten us? And I think that for us, I mean, directly to Wanda's point, like we've been really unpacking, like, what is the power of the, of the DA? What is the power, like even explaining the qualified immunity that the DA has, that, like helping people really understand, one, the discretion that any judge has, but certainly a DA. And then what is it, and then what protections are they offered that none of us are offered? And so we have been doing that work, and, certainly with ACLU, Vera Institute Vote, Voice of the Experienced here in Louisiana. Like, we have been on the ground. You know, we can't do our typical program where we would be having those organizing conversations on the ground, but we're doing door hangers, and we're having, you know, we're doing phone calls, and we're, you know, we're texting folks, and then, you know, moving them to a bot experience if they do actually want to engage and have a conversation, so that it becomes a conversation. Because I think that one of the things that's been really critical for, you know, for us is to really kind of help people tease out, like, well, what, you know, like, well, what does it mean to have, you know, progressive leadership in the DA's role? And what do you mean when you say things like discretion? And so really being able to unpack that. And so in addition to, you know, printables and all of those things, we're having, you know, we do coffee chats every Friday where we walk constituents through the ballot. And then we talk about those powers. We answer their questions. We provide them with the resources of partners across the state that are doing that work. And it has been profound to just kind of have folks interacting with us to just better understand the process. And I think that that's what we underestimate, or have always underestimated about Black and brown voters. Here's what we know is that when you talk to them, they vote, and they engage and they vote. These campaigns do not, right? Like, these campaigns do not spend time talking to Black and brown voters. You know, like, and that the work that we've had the ability to do has been a game changer, right? And so it's like, when we focus specifically on infrequent voters of color, and when I tell you, if I talk to them, my numbers always come back 60% or higher in terms of them actually turning out to vote. And also, I remind folks too that organizations like ours, Black Voters Matter, you know, certainly, you know, New Florida Majority, like, we have data. Like, I'm not telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know about our folks actually turning out to vote when engaged. And also too, given the real information of, like, what does all of this mean and what's the impact of it? And so I've been really proud to, you know, to be having these coffee clutches with folks. You know, we're doing power clusters and power hours with all of these different groups to, one, have conversations, but then also two, to get them engaged and having conversations with people in community about why their vote and their voice matters. And that, you know, and that even with all the disinformation, with all of the different things that are happening, you know, across this country and in the media that I think seeks to kind of dampen our spirits, you know, take away our hope. We're telling folks, like, again, they wouldn't be working this hard if your vote and your voice didn't matter. And here's why it matters. And here's why we need you to turn out and, you know, and have unprecedented turnout November 3rd. And so we have been doing that work and giving people, and then too, ensuring that they have all of those pathways. When you talk about civil rights and kind of civil liberties and all of the, you know, kind of the different, you know, pieces of this, I mean, like, it's playing out in such vicious ways, right? Like, we've got, you know, our Secretary of State is moving longstanding early voting locations because he's mad that he lost a lawsuit about equitable voting and access during a public, you know, health nightmare that is a pandemic that is ongoing. And, oh, by the way, Louisiana has had higher numbers than most states in addressing and trying to keep the numbers down around the pandemic. We've also, you know, been seeing, you know, kind of the voter suppression popping up in ways that seem much more in your face, and being able to police that and, you know, build out really strong election protection programs. And I cannot tell you how much community is like, how can we help and how can we be a part of that? And so I think that, you know, all of the ways that we're thinking about doing those things, you know, I feel, you know, excited about, you know, ACLU, Lawyers Committee, Legal Defense Fund, all, you know, like, we've got real capacity to be able to hold folks accountable, so that in the aftermath, as Alana said, on November 4th, whatever needs to happen, we've got the record of what needs to what will, you know, what will ultimately maybe become a lawsuit, what will ultimately, you know, be the, you know, the foundation for what we need to make sure that equity and justice stand, no matter what happens during this election.
Thank you. You all have brought up such important points. One, by the events of this summer, I think people who have either been regularly engaged or not very engaged are making the direct link between what's driven them to the streets, to their local actors, and to those who are not delivering justice. But two, you know, Ashley brought up the point of how something is actually framed to the voter and to the community member. And Wanda wisely brought up, why aren't you all talking about utility bills? Like, when you all people who often use, we need to advance racial justice, you need to advance how the issue that is commonly known is framed in a racial justice sense. So don't talk about a tax credit. Talk about your light bill. Talk about your gas bill, because that's what everyday community members are facing. But to Andrea, you certainly speak to the civil rights and civil liberties that are at stake on down ballot races. But also, if you could, do you feel like in Florida specifically, that down ballot races are being drowned out by the presidential election? And how do you ensure the engagement with the issues on the down ballot races with so much happening at the top of the ticket?
Yeah, I mean, that happens. And we're in a fight with Florida Power and Light right now, talking about those utility bills. So the county commission, we got them to pass a resolution saying that light companies should not disconnect people's electricity during this pandemic. And then Florida Power and Light is like trying to go ahead and move on that anyway. And so I think that is really critical, that we're consistently engaging community members and holding elected officials, whether they have a R behind their name or a D behind their name, holding them accountable to the things that our communities need and deserve. And I think, on the same token, we have a team that registered over 100,000 people to vote after 2018, because we knew it was on us to realize the promise of Amendment 4. And many other organizations did the same. And then, just like our unemployment system was designed to fail, our voter registration system is designed to fail. And so it went down. The last day before you registered to vote, you could not get on that website after 5 p.m. And so the last 7 hours, it was just down. And so just today we were kind of frustrated in our, we're able to file a lawsuit and we weren't able to get that additional relief that we were asking for. But I do think it's really imperative that we continue to talk to communities about the things that are impacting them, because people care about their electricity, they care about protecting our beaches, they care about investments in our schools. And I think that that's exactly why, we need to do, just like Ashley was talking about, helping break down what decisions get made where. And the decisions that get made by the school board versus the decisions that get made by the county commission. We take people to Tallahassee, we get them in front of that Public Utilities Commission, and some of those commissioners, they haven't seen, regular citizens, everyday people in those hearings ever. So I think for us, it's really important that we engage people, and not just staff, but community members who are willing to take a day off work and come with us to Tallahassee. Make sure that our elected officials are hearing from people who, are experiencing these policies and the impact of these policies. And so I think that's organizing. I mean, I think that's like so important to me, especially because in a place like Florida, the resources pour in during an election. So the 2 months before an election, there's resources everywhere, and they're on the radio and they're on people's doors, they're in people's inboxes. But when that happens and then it's silence for the next year, like there's a way that people inevitably, they feel disrespected and they feel used, and it feels really transactional to engage in politics. And so I think that's really our mission and our mandate, to make sure people know, like, no, actually building power happens 365 days a year. And yeah, we need to get people elected that will be accountable, but then we actually, like Wanda said, like we actually have to hold them accountable, and we have to show up at those, public hearings and push them. So, I just, and it's harder than it sounds. It's really hard. It's really hard work to be out there and to carry people along in a process and to build trust and to be consistent. I mean, I say it all the time to our organizers. You have to have that meeting. If it's the first Wednesday of every month from 5 to 7 at this church, it has to be every first Wednesday of every month at that church from 5 to 7. Like you can't, that has to be sacred. And it's through that kind of consistency that you build real relationship, and like real leaders are able to, emerge, that then we're able to support. And then, watching people fly and get transformed by being part of a campaign, like that gives me life.
Brandon, I think you're on mute, or?
While Brandon is working on the technical
I think I figured it out.
Oh, there he is. I was
Okay.
going to go. Yeah, go ahead.
All
Brandon.
right. No, I really appreciate you, and I really apologize for that. I was simply saying that I wasn't familiar with the day-to-day work of all the panelists, but it's extremely clear why you three were selected to be panelists. I mean, you all are doing such transformative day in and day out work, and it's not transactional, and it does need to be every Wednesday or every first Wednesday, because to speak to what you all have said, it can feel like you're being used once every 4 years. And so you're not going to get anybody on those first 8 Wednesdays. But once they see your commitment to the community and see that you're holding these meetings, whether they're 2 people or 25 people, you gain that trust, you gain that buy-in. And so, look, the next question I have for Ashley and Wanda is kind of the flip side of potentially the top of the ticket drowning out what's at stake at the down ballot races, although I don't know it to be true in Louisiana and Georgia. But how are community members in you all's respective states getting that same amount of attention in you all's respective states? Do they feel like their vote matters in presidential races? Because sometimes Louisiana is blue during gubernatorial races, but consistently red during presidential races. But beginning with you, Wanda, like how are your community members reacting to either the attention or lack thereof to down ballot races?
Yeah, so we don't have that problem of flipping colors back and forth here in Georgia. We are solidly scarlet, although I will say right now, I feel like we're really purple. But yeah, I think that, you know, we continue to, no matter what the headlines say, we continue to push the message of power building and doing that from the grassroots up, starting and looking in your local communities, understanding the roles of those folks, holding those folks accountable, and understanding the issues that are taking, the issues that are affecting your life every single day. You know, but it is difficult when you have outside organizations come in and drop a lot of money, parachute in, start to push their own agendas and what it is that they think is important. And so to build on what Andrea said, it, you know, and Ashley is so good at this, and so are the folks over at Vote. I have so much love for the folks, you know, over in Louisiana doing great work. You know, it's the consistency. It's being with them day in and day out. You know, it's me being in Valdosta during a runoff race for mayor and a citywide city council seat, and explaining to folks that that a seat and that race is every bit as important as who sits it at 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza. I just like saying that. And so, you know, reminding our folks that that's really what's important. And it's difficult. I won't even say. I mean, you know, some of our partners have lost some of their canvassers because groups will come in and they're paying $20 an hour and they're paying weekly, and they'll pay on your Cash App account. I mean, it's tough. It's difficult. But we just have to continue with that consistency. We have to keep educating our folks and explaining to them and modeling and showing what power building really looks like. And you know, if I can just borrow a page from the president's debate guide, if I can just go back to a previous question for a second. You know, when Andrea talked about, you know, taking folks to the Capitol, you know, look, Tallahassee, same Atlanta, they're not convenient. They're in the north part of the state. It's not convenient for a lot of our folks, especially in the rural areas, to get there. But we have to start pushing our folks to get in front of these elected officials and have their voices heard. Here in Georgia, everything is so centered around Atlanta, and that is extremely frustrating. It's extremely frustrating for the folks in South Georgia and Middle Georgia and Coastal Georgia who already feel like their voices are silenced. I actually had a funder once, ask for, a big idea, something, kind of crazy and radical. And I was like, all right, well, sure, give me some money for transportation, lodging, and food and stipends so I can bring working class folks to the Capitol to meet with elected officials. And she just kind of looked at me. I was like, yeah, so Atlanta's really far away. A lot of people still have jobs where they don't have the thing called PTO. So if they're not working, they're not getting paid. So how are they supposed to get involved in the process at that level? It's just not easy. And so one of the maybe silver linings of the pandemic is we are having via digital, via Zoom, access to elected officials like maybe we didn't have before. So encouraging our folks, hey, digitally get in their face, right? Digitally make your voice heard, virtually get in their face and start talking about what's important in your community and rally up your folks, your neighbors, your squad to get them on those Zoom calls so they can also have a virtual audience with these decision makers.
Wanda, I'm gonna ask you for a 15-second follow-up, but really, can you just tell me what the reaction is to the parachuting in? What do the community members see? What do the canvassers feel? Just your take on that.
Sadly, they're used to it. They are conditioned to it. It is the norm for them. Us being there, for the runoff for mayor last year was an anomaly to them, sadly.
Thank you. Ashley, if you could react to the residents' reaction to either feeling like their vote doesn't matter, or are they connecting that 2020 November 3rd, regardless of how the state turns out for the presidential, we're going to be there?
Yeah, no, I think that folks, I think, literally one of the taglines for us this election has just been like, this is deeply personal. Like voting has always been personal, but like this particular year, it feels unbelievably personal. I think that people have seen, like in Louisiana in particular, like we don't, so I won't say we don't have folks that parachute in, but like when they parachute in, they're not trying to like, Wanda, they're not paying 20. Like we're currently paying the most. So we don't get
That's because y'all flip back and forth. You got shades of blue over there in Louisiana. We do not.
Gotcha. And so, but I think that, but what I love though, and I think to Andrea's point though, is that like what we've been all committed to is really about building power. And I think that, people don't talk about that enough, right? Like, or it's like this bad word or like something's going to happen if you talk about what does it mean for us to stand in our power? And I mean, it's, the quote is older than me, older than all of us probably. Like that, the reality is that the only thing that will ever stand against money and power is organized people. And I think that like for me, we talk about that engine all the time. And when we're in community organizing, we remind folks that like the only way that we're going to get what we want is to be organized and consistent. And so, I mean, I think, for me, I feel like, I've kind of yielded some of this election to God. I was like, I just can't even like, I feel like my life force can't hold it all. Like, like it's just too much. And it's scary. And I think that, I'm on phone calls where folks are telling me, like to plan for 30 days after the election. And what are we telling, people of color about what may happen and what are, like things that I just, I don't know, conversations that I haven't even processed yet to think about, like, how to protect and think about the ways in which we're working in community. But I do feel like folks feel like it's deeply personal. I think that, we just had a gubernatorial and statewide elections last year. And so it's real for folks that had it not been for, the governor that got elected, they wouldn't even have 500,000 people wouldn't even have Medicaid expansion in the midst of a pandemic right now. Right. And so it feels so people kind of see where the issues kind of meet them in their homes, right? Like meet them, at their, like at their doorstep. I think this eviction crisis, even though it feels like there are these remedies, folks are really clear that like, the day, the foreclosure, the eviction piece ends right after the inauguration, right? I mean, like people are smart. They get this stuff. And so I think you know, like so I think for us, it's just about like, how do we help them continuously build power? How do we help, you know, give them the tools to be able to do that? And, you know, and, you know, all of our coalitions are anchored by base building groups. And so from the very beginning, like this intention about being people centered and knowing the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, you know, like that is always how we've moved in this work. And then also showing them how we've built power, right? And so I think that over time, you know, Louisiana and Florida did it in the same year and did it together in support of each other around re-enfranchising formerly incarcerated people. You know, I saw Hillary just dropped in the chat about the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, where, you know, it's like sweeping criminal justice reforms. And so what happens is that when you do what you told people you were going to do and you show up consistently, folks believe and they see their power in action and they keep coming back for more. And so I think that, you know, that's what we continuously have been building on for the last 5 years. You know, it's like campaign after campaign, whether it be Amendment 2, where we ended the practice of convicting folks with non-unanimous juries, to today, like we've been building power with communities across our state to say, we can change things. Yes, we're the Deep South, but that doesn't have to mean that it can only be one way. And they've been telling us what we couldn't do for a really long time. And if you look back over the last at least 3 years, we've done what they said we couldn't do time and time again. We've made history time and time again, and we're going to keep doing it and keep moving, and we're going to continuously build power. And power is not a bad word. Power is actually the only word that I think, I feel like I'm being beat up with the word power on a daily basis. And I'm just trying to make sure we got enough folks on our side as the other side keeps coming for us. And so I do feel like folks are ready. I think that folks are ready to go down ballot. I think that they understand what's at stake. I think that they know and, you know, and can kind of hear all the dog whistle politics. And folks are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I think that people underestimate how powerful that feeling is, and how, you know, in a place like Louisiana where, you know, Mayor Cantrell fusses at me when I say this, but I was like, I checked my facts. I was like, we are still the most incarcerated place in the world. And yes, you know, we weren't for a minute, but we are back. And at the end of the day, what that means though, is that like folks understand in a way that they never understood before. Folks have been re-enfranchised, and Vote is working every day. And we, you know, certainly support them in that, to re-engage and get those folks registered to vote so that we can actually respond, right? Like, because it is personal, it is local, it is, you know, voting is powerful, and just reminding folks that, you know, their vote is their voice, and that here are all the ways in the past that we've been able to change things with our vote, and this is how we're going to keep changing things with our vote.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you also, Ashley, for just a few second follow-up, and if anybody else wants to jump in, looking at that Justice Reinvestment Initiative, how important is it to get wins on the board and showing product, showing that it's working? And what would, you know, your quick advice be for, like, if the wins are just difficult to come about in some of these southern states?
I think the wins are important. I don't want to say that they're everything, right? Like, but I do think that, like, it's about the effort. It's about the energy and the momentum that you create that people care about, right? Like, if this is about, you know, to Andrea's point, this is about, like, if the meeting's on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, showing up every day Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Like, this is about folks knowing that we're standing in our own power, and then standing with them to build power. And so I think that the wins are important, and they energize the work in a way that, you know, that certainly has been critical to the work that we've been building in Louisiana. But then we also understand that it's still the Deep South. It's still, you know, hard to, you know, to win consistently, but that the you know, for me, it's about the effort, and it's about the heart that's put into the fight, and people respond and come back to that each and every day. And then the other thing that we also experience in the South, and this is for all of our states, is that, and then when we win, we got to fight to keep it. So like, that's the hard part, is that, you know, we've seen in Florida where they're, you know, like, we just, you know, like, they just re-enfranchised all these folks, and now they've, you know, created all these barriers and gutted, you know, this landmark, you know, legislation. And so we've got to always, you know, like, not only sustain the wins, but we've got to sustain and continue to move the needle. And I think that, again, the wins are important, but I think that, you know, what they may have, you know, like, but when they do come back, and they come back harder than they did before, that our folks see that, understand that, and literally are like, Ashley, what's the plan? Norris, what's the plan? Right? Andrea, what's the plan? Wanda, what's the plan? Because people feel it and they're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, no, we worked too hard for them to be able to take that back. Right. And that's what they do. Cause it's just like, there's this one moment of let's do the right thing. And I certainly think that there are a lot of things that, emotions and feelings that have been emboldened by our national leadership. And so we start to see all these wins being kind of peeled back, and the fear of the actual power that we're building. And so for us, we're always reflecting back to folks like, again, like they wouldn't be working this hard if your power didn't matter, if they didn't see and feel your power. And so, I do think those wins are critical and they matter, and they're deeply felt by community. But I also feel like, it's about the heart that we bring to this and about the fact that we keep showing up and we show up consistently.
Thank you for that. Before I go to Andrea for the next question, I do want to do like a kind of a housekeeping. I don't see a Q&A button, so if folks have questions, are we just leaving it in the chat? If you all could clarify, Sarah, you can clarify.
Yes. If
Okay.
you have a question, you can just put it in the chat. If you also want to speak, you can go into the participant tab and raise your hand, and then we'll know you're on queue.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Wanda, Andrea, do you all have any quick reactions to the wins versus states where wins may come a little bit more difficult, and how that resonates with the folks that you all are organizing?
Yeah, I agree with what Ashley said. And I would just also add that we need to have agency to define what a win looks like, to define victory for us in our communities. And so I always like to give the example of Reverend Ezekiel Holly down in Dawson, Georgia, in Terrell County. In 2018, we had a reporter with us on a bus tour. If you've not seen our bus, please do yourself a favor, go to our Facebook page. And
I saw it down the street from my house.
Well, there you go. The Black Bus of America. There it is. There it is. And so we had a reporter with us from the Washington Post, and they quoted Reverend Holly in an article. I went back down to Terrell County in January, and when I tell you Reverend Holly pulled that article out of his suit jacket and referred back to his quote in that article, y'all, that is a win. Reverend Holly is 74 years old. He has been organizing for most of his life. He is an expert and loved and adored in the community. But having a national media outlet validate his words, the work that he has done for his entire life, that means a lot to him. That means everything to him. So when we get to decide what a win is, that's when we really start to help our folks understand and build power. I'll give another quick example, some organizing that I do down in the neighborhood in Southern Fulton County where I live. We had an issue where there was some zoning coming up in a neighboring city, and we were organizing residents to come to these meetings. We had the fire marshal actually close the meeting room for 3 meetings in a row because we kept showing up. And the underlying message to the residents are, look, elected officials see this. The mayor and council see this. We have now raised the bar. We have now put them on notice that all the things that they did when this room was empty no longer happens, because we are watching, we are paying attention, and we are here. And now here we are in COVID, and now 28, 38, 58 of us will show up on a Zoom call for their city council meetings, and we continue to virtually be in their faces and be involved in this process.
Thank you, Wanda. Andrea, do you have any reactions?
I mean, it always makes me think about one of the first campaigns I ever worked on, the California Domestic Worker Bill of Rights campaign. The governor vetoed the bill, and we did a huge piñata with his face on it. And one of the domestic workers that had come with us to Sacramento over 10 times got on the mic and said, he may have vetoed the bill, but he hasn't vetoed everything that we've learned. And it took us a few years, but we did pass that legislation. And I think for me, that's like the spirit of, we're never going to win in some places unless we build, unless we invest there, unless we build strong institutions and leaders and keep advancing. It's just, you know, I mean, I love what Wanda said around how we have to define what victory looks like. And sometimes victory is beating back some of the most offensive, vile stuff that they're throwing at us. Sometimes it's, you know, sometimes it's defense, sometimes it's strategic offense. But at the end of the day, we do have to ask ourselves that question of, do we feel stronger now at the end of, you know, at the end of this year, at the end of this campaign than we did before it? And for a long time in Florida, election cycle after election cycle, after the campaign, like, we did not feel stronger. Whether we won or we lost, we were not feeling stronger. We were feeling used. We were feeling like at odds and fighting with other groups in the state. We were feeling like we hadn't advanced our long-term objectives. And so at some point we just got together and said, well, something has to give. And so that's actually when we brought together some deeply rooted organizations in the state that are committed to racial justice and are committed to being in the state long-term, and forged a commitment to work to build trust and to work together towards 5-year and 10-year objectives. And it's totally transformed how we work together in the state. And when we're able to situate like a given campaign or a given rapid response, like within our longer term vision and within like our longer term shared purpose. And you know, everyone on this call knows that this work is not for the faint of heart. But you know, we have to, like, our purpose and our vision has to be our North Star.
I really do hope that folks on this call are taking notes. Just listening to you all, it's you have to be really keeping up to catch everything that folks on this call are dropping. I mean, just us defining what a win is. Ashley had mentioned something I almost let slip, but you know, standing with community members. All too often, advocates think they're standing for community members and speaking for community members and representing. No, if you want to do this work in an inclusive, empowering way, we don't speak for, we don't advocate for, we speak with, advocate with, and take the collective to the powers that be to see the change we want. Folks, I want to include the family here. The Southern Collective has been growing closer and closer, and Alana mentioned something earlier that I almost let slip. There does need to be recognition and a thank you to affiliate support and nationwide initiatives. This work feels transformative. These conversations feel impactful. And I know it takes a lot of time to put together, but hats off to ASNI for ensuring that we can grow, learn, mature together. So please unmute you all selves if you all have any questions. I want to move into the Q&A, and also don't be shy. This is a comfortable, safe environment. Ask your questions. I've often sat on questions because I don't want to speak in front of everyone, and I just wish I would have gotten that answer from Wanda or Ashley or Andrea. So ask, unmute yourselves, and let's start it off. Did I do that right, Sarah, or do people need to like raise their hand? Okay.
Both are fine.
Okay. I know y'all playing around. Alana, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I also didn't want to ask questions because I'm like, wait, I'm a panelist, but I'm not a panelist, and I want to. I just want to say that so many reactions, so many reflections. Just want to individually thank Wanda and Ashley and Andrea and tell you that we recognize that you each need rest and that you have run this race thus far. But we are so grateful that you're standing in the gap. We're so grateful that you are walking with community and that you are actually being those engineers for social change that we desperately need. So one of the things that I recognize and I heard reflected in each of your comments is that, of course, proximity is the most important thing, but then there is a translation of sorts that you are doing in your community activism. And it's not because the voices of community are not strong enough or are not clear enough. But there does have to be a Rosetta Stone, a translation, if you will, of allowing community concerns to be brought before elected leaders and folks who have the ability to make change. Because I think for so long, they felt that as though they can speak above community, that they can use vernacular and diction to confuse and to cloud and to make things ambiguous. And I think one of the powers that I see in each of your organizations is that ability to translate, is that ability to simplify, and is that ability to really crystallize what the messages are and how community really does have the answers to the questions that are the most pressing and the problems essentially that are most pressing in our communities. And so I just wanted to also make a comment about justice reinvestment. Justice reinvestment would not have been possible but for the decades of community organizing that had gone on in Louisiana around criminal legal reform. So justice reinvestment is something that has happened at that time, it was 34 or 35 states. And what happens is the Pew Charitable Trust comes in and gets permission from the government to do research around the drivers of incarceration in the state. And that model is incredibly powerful because you look at the data, they present the data to elected leaders and the members of the task force, and they make legislative reform recommendations. What had not been included in that model before was the relationship that we established in the state of Louisiana, where community was empowered to be able to speak directly to members of the task force and members of the legislature. And so now Louisiana radically transformed the model for justice reinvestment in that states that participate in this project going forward, they must have a community component, and it's not ad hoc, it is central to how do we even look to determine what's going to be on the agenda for legislative reform. We must in fact seek directly impacted community members to understand how they've been impacted by the system. And so that set us up not just for success in passing 10 pieces of legislation, but it also set us up for re-enfranchising folks in 2018 with the rights restoration. It set us up for putting the governor back in office, which actually, frankly, I want to say single-handedly, but the work of the Power Coalition absolutely completely transformed that election for John Bell Edwards. It set us up. It will set us up for November 3rd. It will set us up for our district attorney elections, as she spoke about. It will set us up for our congressional races, where we have folks who are challenging the rights of protesters, the folks who are actually marching on the ground in honor of Trayford Pellerin, who just lost his life to police violence. There are members of Congress who are actively calling for peaceful protesters to be killed. Those individuals are on the ballot, and our folks are ready and prepared for that. And so I think I just want to say thank you to these incredible leaders. I want to say that I know that the ancestors, I know Fanny and I know Harry, I know they are just looking at these women and saying, you are in fact our wildest dreams, and keep going.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I think something that Alana just spoke to, foundations aren't built easily. It's very difficult to just hop in and win the thing that you want to see in 2020 or 2021. Foundation takes time, and it has to be built upon with inclusivity, with strategy, with a true commitment to the communities that you're trying to work within. And so we see Elia. I think I know Elia, if that's the same Elia.
Yes, you do know Elia.
Hey, Elia.
Yeah, so I'm currently one of the interns at ACLU Tennessee. I just wanted, from my experience, this is also a little bit of like my bias seeping in. I'm a Dominican woman who was born in Virginia, grew up in South Carolina, has marched in the streets of Tennessee. I was just wondering if you, like, first of all, I want to give my absolute respect and admiration to every single person that has spoken. It has been absolutely incredible to learn from you guys, learn from your experiences. I was wondering if some of you could speak on the intersection of the needs of Hispanic populations versus the needs of Black populations, and how you've been able to empower those two communities, even though their needs are incredibly different, but at the same time, they intersect in so many places.
Andrea, you want to take the
I
first
can
crack?
kick us off. Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the question that we grapple with as as an organization all the time. Like we know that to fundamentally shift the state, we need to build a new majority. We need to forge right relationships and a coalition between Black, Latino, young, progressive, women to win. And that, that's just the math. If you want to get to 50+1 or in a ballot initiative 60 or 66 plus one, we need to figure that out. And I think it's the question of like, how do we do that without erasing or collapsing our differences? How do we actually celebrate our diversity? How do we come together and learn from one another? How do we have the really hard conversations around how anti-Blackness is showing up, right? In Latino communities, or how Afro-Latinos are being, voices aren't being elevated and experiences aren't being elevated. And how do we have the conversations about anti-immigrant sentiment amongst African Americans, sometimes targeting Haitians or Black immigrants, and sometimes targeting Latino, Indigenous, and Mestizo. And then, that's here in a place like South Florida, Miami in particular, where we have a right-wing Cuban elite, where it's oftentimes your slumlord probably speaks Spanish. Your employer may speak Spanish, and so really trying to dig in there. I think we really believe we do need to have like race. It can't just be race. It has to be race. It has to be class. Like we have to have the full conversation. And really grounded in, like for us, what's been really useful is to talk about right-wing ideology, and what is the right perpetuating all the time, and what is the racism and the machismo and patriarchy and individualism that's in the water we drink and the air we breathe and on all of the radio waves and TV and magazines, all coming at us all the time through school, through church, and then what we're moving towards, right? And I think we've spent some time trying to articulate, well, how would we say like what we're for? And if it's, interdependence and authentic democracy and people and planet above corporations, how do we make sure that our campaigns don't undermine what we're really trying to do long term? And I think it was Ashley that spoke to this earlier around how like oftentimes the messaging experts or the donor class or the national organizations are like trying to get us to say, oh, well, Proposition X, Y, or Z, people should vote for it because it'll save the taxpayers money. And actually, no, we're not trying to promote that kind of message because there are some of our rights and our human dignity that it's not a matter of cost savings. It's a matter of housing is a human right, and how do we want to treat each other, and what is human dignity. And so, I mean, I think that those things, it's not always easy. I know, listen, like the Amendment 4, like we had a lot of conversations around how do we thread the needle between forging a coalition where we know we're going to need some Republican voters to stand with us on this, and we can't alienate them. But at the same time, we don't want to undermine the dignity and humanity of people with felony convictions, or the fact that the state's sometimes locking up people who like did not commit those felony convictions, which everyone on this call knows. So, I mean, it's the work. Like that's the work is for us to figure out how we're going to come together across lines of difference, and how do we figure out how to navigate being in right relationship, whether you're white, Black, or brown, whether you're urban or rural, whether you're immigrant or native, like we have to figure out all those things. But, we're human beings, we're complex. I believe in us, we can do it.
Hear that. Sarah, unmute yourself. Let me know if we still have time for one more question.
I think we may, if it's just a quick question, if anyone wants to unmute themselves. If not, I can move to the next slide.
All right, yeah, let's, I think we have a little bit more work to do. Okay. So let's just continue to acknowledge like what brought us here as a collective in our objectives. We want to build strong and sustainable organizations in the South. Create, which is what we've contributed to today, a peer learning community to share resources around organizational and programmatic challenges and opportunities. Advance high-impact collaborative initiatives across the region, and strengthen our partnerships between Southern affiliates and national and the national office. Our vision and values, the vision, and I believe this is what we worked on in Alabama, seems like 5 years ago now. But the ACLU Southern Collective honors the unique history of the South, where our commitment to social change, anti-racism, equity, and inclusion is bravely leveraged for collective power, and where all communities have opportunities to deepen solidarity, amplify the voices of the marginalized, and share resources while dismantling systemic oppression. In our values, accountability, bravery, inclusion, and centering directly impacted communities. And so I think I am supposed to plug that we, what is this, Sarah? What am I looking at? Save the date. I thought.
We'll have a virtual convening.
Okay.
Within Collective.
All right. And thank you to all our planning committee members. And is that the final slide, Sarah?
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we are almost, well, it seems like we have a few more minutes. Hillary, can you let me know if I'm supposed to plug a potential next Southern Collective meeting, or is that wrong?
No, you just did. We've got our the convening that we are in the planning mode for. As we keep saying, we've got a little bit more of a runway this year, so we're really excited to bring the whole Southern Collective back together, at least virtually. And yeah, and be on the lookout for more kind of updates around speaker series like this fantastic one today. Again, thank you so much to each one of our speakers. It was a pleasure to have you all today. And again, acknowledging you have 18,000 other things on your plate. So we appreciate you all making the time.
Indeed. So again, as the moderator, also want to especially thank, I really do feel like this was a masterclass and you all have so much knowledge and I took away a lot. But thank you to Wanda Mosley, Ashley Shelton, Andrea Mercado for sharing with us. And I see Sandra took her camera on. Do you want to say anything?
No, I think actually I speak for all of us, but I also wanted to have a thanks to Brandon Tucker for moderating this panel. For those who know, Brandon is also going to be leading a working group later today, right, on voter intimidation.
Voter intimidation and violence at the polls, yeah.
Yep. So, but thank you. And thank you so much to all of our speakers, and save those dates for our Southern Collective annual convening, which will be virtually this year. And thank you again to Brandon and everyone on our panel today.
And y'all, if you can, for the last 1 minute, just put your cameras on if you're in a place you can. And if y'all want to just follow suit with Claire, and thank our panelists as well, because it's deeply appreciated. And again, valuable, we learned so much. So I think we can close it out if we're ready.
Awesome. Thank you all and have a fantastic weekend. And please send best wishes, love, and prayers to those in Lake Charles, Louisiana, who are bracing for a second hurricane in a couple of months. So I just ask you all to keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.